Now, Washington has strongly backed the Libyan opposition since the revolutionary wave engulfed the state. It's now equally enthusiastic in its support against Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. But the concern is whether America's decision to take sides could backfire on its closest Middle East ally, Israel. RT's Gani Jijikian looks at the possible repercussions of U.S. policy.
As nations in the Middle East and North Africa are torn between the struggle to bring about change and the struggle not to let that change ruin their lives, Washington views the Arab Spring as an opportunity to finally see some of its longtime foes crumble.
Even though Iran is not an Arab country, the Arab Spring could spread to...
Absolutely. And I think in many ways it's a matter of time before that kind of change and reform and revolution occurs in Iran.
Under the umbrella of Arab revolutions, Washington is also beating the drums of regime change in Syria, Iran's closest ally in the region. Violence within the country has been widely condemned. Countries like Russia and China call for both sides in Syria to talk and end the bloodshed, while America is blaming Assad alone.
The transition to democracy in Syria has begun, and it's time for Assad to get out of the way.
I think Assad's days, just like Gaddafi, are numbered.
Let's hope that Bashar Assad is next in line.
They've overthrown Gaddafi. They're going to have a proxy or client government in Tripoli. The next step is Syria. They want to overthrow Syria next, to take advantage of any movement that exists in Syria, to overthrow the Assad government. Not they have a more democratic government, a more humane government, but a government that is allied with the United States. And after Syria, the next target will be Iran itself.
Watching regimes go down one by one, American politicians are filled with new hopes and aspirations. Some went as far as to predict the Arab Spring would spread all across the world.
What this is all about is the Arab Spring, and Bashar Assad is next. And even places like China and Russia and other places, they are very uneasy. This is about people aspiring for freedom, and that's what the Libyan people have just achieved.
That's wishful thinking on the part of John McCain, but it speaks volumes to where the real orientation is in Washington, not just of the Republicans, but the Democrats, too. So they would like to overthrow the government in China. They would like to overthrow the government in Russia. They would like to overthrow the government in Venezuela and Cuba, or wherever people are independent of the dictates of Washington.
But when it comes to Syria and Iran, Washington doesn't seem to be just fantasizing about revolutions. It actively fosters the process by pledging support for anti-government movements there. But some say this might eventually turn against America's closest ally in the region, Israel.
What you have with Hamas could essentially spread to many more places, and then you'd have a much larger population base in an extremely hostile position towards the very existence of Israel.
By throwing its support behind revolution makers, analysts say Washington is seeking to increase its influence and control in these countries.
Let's look at how things have been in the control department so far. Egypt. Thousands protest against the U.S.-backed military there that's still in power. Last week, Egyptians stormed the Israeli embassy, enraged by the killing of 5 Egyptian border guards. In Libya, a Washington-supported leadership is taking over, but the country is at risk of plunging into tribal war. Syria, the opposition includes those with radical agendas. So the aftermath of the so-called Arab Spring remains very murky and difficult. Yet Washington seems to be using the Arab Spring to fulfill its longtime goals. But the fear is it might end up getting the opposite of what it wishes for and undermining the whole region. I'm Ganesh Shekyan reporting from Washington, RT.
Well, Israel's strained relations with Turkey and Egypt threaten to leave it dangerously isolated from the whole region, a situation made even more delicate by the upcoming decision at the UN on whether to grant the Palestinian statehood. Let's get more analysis on this now, live with Dr. Ayam Salama, Professor of International Law and member of the Egyptian Council of Foreign Affairs. Many thanks for being with us here on RT. Now, Turkey's Prime Minister has warned Israel that it's facing growing isolation in the region. Do you agree with that? And if so, how might the freeze of relations with Turkey and Egypt affect Israel's security?
Absolutely, I agree with you, and actually I agree with the Prime Minister of Turkey, Erdogan, what has been said, but I would like to point out that this is not the first actually threat to Israel, that it would be isolated within the international community. It was in 2004, according or under the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice concerning the advisory opinion of the Israeli illegal and illegitimate war in Palestine in the West Bank. The court unanimously stated that with these grave violations of both international humanitarian law and international human rights, Israel would be isolated within the international communities, because the acts of Israel undoubtedly reflect that it is not willing for peace. It is not a peace lover under the commitments of the United Nations Charter. Consequently, the very strong statement by the Turkish government after the grave violations of the humanitarian maritime law and the international humanitarian law, I mean the incident that occurred on the 31st May last year, 2010, Erdogan threatened Israel, and he said that these acts actually will not be beyond the international law. And yesterday here in Cairo, within the official convention of the Arab League for the Arab States Ministers of Foreign Affairs, he said that Israel has been sweeping, quashing, repressing international law since the birth of the state on the 15th May 1948.
Well, Dr. Salama, you say it's not the first time that Israel's faced possible isolation in the region, but is this perhaps a more serious moment that we're seeing in Israel's history? Why now are we seeing these very formally very friendly nations turning on Israel's policy?
Actually, because Israel insistently does not even apologize for the bloodshed for both the Egyptians and the Turkish. And Israel actually become its activities, its illegal acts actually mirror that this is not an ordinary, regular member of even the United Nations. And these acts resulted in severe pressures upon the shoulders of the sovereign Arab states, and in particular Turkey and Egypt. And Israel actually could not recognize that both of the two countries in the Middle East, Turkey and Egypt on the other hand, are the most friendly, formally speaking, countries with Israel. So
okay,
I
Dr.
do not
Salama,
think...
let's just look ahead now to next week briefly. The Palestinian quest for statehood's gaining support ahead of that crucial UN vote that we're all expecting. What are the chances, do you think, of it going through? And what will be next for Israel if the Palestinian Authority gets UN recognition?
Unfortunately, President Obama, the head of the key state and unfortunately, the single polar power worldwide, yesterday in the morning shocked all the human activists, all the Arabs, and in particular the Palestinians, and he said that if the Palestinians are going to the United Nations seeking for the declaration for their independence and the recognition of the United Nations organization, he said, Mr. Obama, that the Palestinians chose the wrong space or the wrong track. So I doubt that the measures adopted by the Palestinian autonomy, the Palestinian Authority, topped by President Mahmoud Abbas, I doubt that they will, result in fruitful, effective, positive results for this side, unfortunately.
Okay, Dr. Ayman Salama, Professor of International Law, a member of the Egyptian Council of Foreign Affairs, thank you for those thoughts.